2019 and 2020 is the 2-year period where change and death and karmic lessons are dancing with each other. This hasn't happened on the planet in this sign for like 500 years. Right in the middle of 2020, there's a shift in the archetypal energy that the future is moving in. From May for the next year and a half, our major focus of movement is going to be on ideas and communication, whereas this last year and a half in Cancer, it's been more about preparation, self-care, and readiness to go out and speak into what we want to create.
How do we prep?
Discipline, responsibility, and facing your lessons. Be ready for some hard work, and it can be an extraordinary passage. I am a firm believer in shadow work for the individual, and that is you take a look at what are you most afraid of, what are you wishing weren't true, what have you been pretending is not true. You dive into that crucible, and when you wrestle with those demons and come out the other end, you are more integrated, more whole, more you. Change is fun. Being human is fun. This world is fun. Even though it is filled with yucky stuff, it is actually possible to be in the unfolding yucky stuff and be like, wow, this is an interesting ride. I'm glad I'm here. Our relationship to the sun is way more profound than modern people recognize and know. It's something we oriented our lives towards this thousands of years ago. So what astrology measures is geometrical connections to planets that become raw material that we make our lives out of. There are these points of energy called the nodes of the moon. There's a south one and a north one. That's just it's like a vector of energy that pops out of the power of the moon's orbit crossing paths with the Earth's orbit. When the sun and these nodal angles are aligned in a certain way, we have our eclipses. Because eclipses are transformative and they're predictive, there's this 19-year Saros cycle. Eclipses have power. And they have power to tell us, where are we going? What's the direction of Dharma moving in? The north node of the moon then has that power built into it. It's an archetypal North Star.
What is astrologically going on that is having this darkness appear at this time?
Oh, wow. Well, it's all about Pluto. The primary archetypal power that comes with Pluto as an archetypal consciousness in the form of a planet is this shadow in the psychological world of consciousness. That shadow, Jungian psychology says, shadow is where I place the stuff that I wish weren't true, that I am in the process of denying, that I object or disown. So if you can appreciate that that's what Pluto's power is, then we can have a conversation about, well, what is he doing right now? What's different that makes Pluto's journey now more intense? So now we have to talk about the sign that Pluto's in, which is the sign Capricorn. So Capricorn is the sign where we invented social structures. The financial markets, governments, laws, institutions, all of the structure that we call life on Earth was invented by the archetype of Capricorn. I don't know what was going on 250-ish years ago when Pluto entered Capricorn last, because I wasn't alive then. But I can tell you what happened now, because it was just in 2007 and 2008 when the planet that rules the shadow moved into this sign. And almost immediately, Michael, that's when stuff started to break down. That's when the housing market, the banking market, you remember 2007 and 8?
Absolutely.
So we as astrologers were very hip to this. We were watching it in advance and wondering, well, what's going to happen when that occurs? And then it happened, and it was so precise in terms of the heating up of the breakdowns. One might have said, I'm not an economist or a politico, so I'm not watching the world in that way, but I'm guessing that if we were talking to somebody who knew about housings and banking, they would say, oh, well, things were a mess before 2007 and 8. But clearly, they started to break down like gangbusters when that powerful planet, the planet that brings change and transformation at the cellular level, moved into the sign that created social structures. You do the math. The planet of death plus the sign of social structures equals the last 10 years or so. Saturn is the teacher, and when he comes to his return, he's going, okay, we got to get all this stuff taken care of, or I can't satisfy my returning posture. Pluto is not the teacher. Pluto is the destroyer. Pluto is the lord of the underworld. Pluto is death itself.
I'll pause you for a second. I'm gonna go old school Hawaii on us. Pele, which is death and destruction, also allows for rebirth anew.
Absolutely. And death has to come first. The rebirth follows, but the death comes first. And this is where it's tricky being a human being, Michael, is because death is scary. And the idea that a rebirth will follow is abstract. We have to face the death and trust that the rebirth will follow. And boy, this is a moment on the planet where it looks a lot like death, but not a lot like rebirth about to happen. It is a benefit that this is going on, but we have to navigate the territory that we're in right now where it looks scary.
Tell us about this, and what does it mean when death and the teacher get together?
So you've got all of this power in the great teacher planet, Saturn, and all of this power in Pluto, the great transformer.
Yeah.
Different kind of power. One says death and rebirth is what's going to happen. So transmutation, transformation is going to take place. In order for change to occur, stuff that is has to die. Saturn is the reckoning guy. Saturn is the teacher who says, are you learning from the past? Are you recognizing what you have to put into place to deal with the world on its own terms at this time? 2019 and 2020 is the 2-year period where change and death and karmic lessons are dancing with each other. This hasn't happened on the planet in this sign for like 500 years. The wave of change and reckoning is peaking just in the next 6 weeks or so, because it's in early January that Pluto and Saturn are absolutely in the same place.
I've been calling 2020 the year of clarity, a year of seeing things more clearly. And it sounds like what you're calling her maybe is more of a year of reckoning.
Reckoning is definitely the powerful word for the year. That may bring clarity,
yes,
and some of us will experience clarity as we face the reckoning. But yeah, I would say 2020 is the year of reckoning, and that is because Saturn and Pluto are going to be together. We have an added dimension to 2020 that the planet Jupiter is also moving into Capricorn. He just did that about 4 weeks ago. And Jupiter is a beneficent planet. Jupiter is Saturn's compatriot, all things expansive and bountiful and abundant. So you've got Saturn that creates structure, and Jupiter says, now that you've got structure, life is joyful, life is big, life is expansive. Now, building up this hierarchy of order, change and transformation, reckoning and responsibility, then Jupiter's addition to this is not likely to be bounty and joy as much as just the bigness, because that's what he brings. He brings us sort of a big wave, and Pluto is going to tell him. It's like Jupiter says, hey, I'm going to create a big wave of joy and explosion and bounty. And Pluto says, yeah, nice try, Jupiter. It's got to contribute to the death, destruction, change, or transformation that's happening on the planet at this time.
When I talk to people about money, and they say, you know, money is the root of all evil, money is this, money is that, money is the other thing, I say, no, money is an amplifier. It's going to amplify whatever you bring to the table because of its bigness, because of the energy that it holds. That's what you're talking about with Jupiter, isn't it? It's an amplifier of whatever is coming.
I like to say there's no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit, except that through amplification, Jupiter can bring a bigness that isn't organic and authentic. When I do my daily astro alerts and Jupiter's in the mix in a challenging way, I will often say, don't value something by its face today. Wait a moment, because something that feels important now may not seem important tomorrow because of the amplification piece. And if you think about the fact that we're in like mid-December and we're about a month away from this peak wave, people will say to me all the time, well, what's going to happen? It's already happening. Don't ask what's going to happen. Take the information that's structural and astrological and then perceive the current moment through that lens.
What does it tell us about how we play our cards right now, how we step forward, how we set intention for the new year?
What is happening in the collective is also happening for all of us as individuals. Our job as individuals is to be able to identify what structures must die in order for me to be, fill in the blank, happier, more on purpose, you know, free of trauma. What do I have to be willing to let go of at the level of death? Because Saturn is coming along and joining that process. The preparation for 2020 on an individual level is, am I willing and ready to do the work required to have those changes occur at the deepest level possible? Because if I'm not, Saturn, the teacher, is going to make sure that I am kicked to the curb to learn the lesson. So it now becomes just an individual question. What's changing? What needs to change? And are you ready to step up to the discipline responsibility needed for you to make those changes in your consciousness?
Is there an energy that allows us to really grasp the concept of it's in the planets, it's in the stars. I have to let go in order to make it through this wave of energy that's coming?
Yeah, absolutely. Surrender is key. Willingness to go through the depths, you know, willingness to allow change to come without resisting and objecting. I think that's the key. We're always growing and changing, Michael. It's that we get passes often around, oh, I'm not ready to look at that yet. I'm not ready to do that work. I'm not ready to heal that wound. Work at your own pace. Saturn and Pluto together is not going to give us wiggle room. If there's a way you're being in the world or a thing that you're doing in the world that isn't organic and it isn't really serving you any longer, Saturn's going to kick your ass if you're not doing the work. So if one thing to do is nothing, is just to wait and see what comes up, what grabs your attention, what needs your attention. I don't think any of us are going to get through 2020 not knowing what the lesson is. I think the lesson's going to slap each of us in the face, both personally and globally. And so that's sort of what I'm hoping for people on their personal journeys, in their life lessons, whatever that looks like for people healing their trauma or moving forward in their consciousness, is that The lessons are going to come. Be ready, be open, be willing, be in shape. You're going to run a marathon next year. Are you in shape? If you're not in shape, start getting in shape. What does that mean? That means, is your practice in good shape? Are you meditating? Are you learning? Are you having the deep and difficult conversations with yourself and with others?
Anything else that we need to know about the planets for this year?
So one of the things of reckoning, I think that Pluto and Saturn might create for some people, is that some of your dreams may have to be killed off because they're not in alignment. And this reckoning that's coming is powerful to help get in alignment with that which you are focusing on and paying attention to. From that perspective, there's tremendous success, if you will, I'm going to air quote that success, available. Just because Pluto is toppling structures doesn't mean that your dreams get toppled. There's plenty of room for creating powerful expressions in the world next year. But yeah, the impulses have to have some sense of alignment, or Saturn will come along and say, oh yeah, your karmic lesson right now is to recognize that, maybe you're not going to be forward center, for a basketball team, Michael, because you're 5'5" and 56 years old. Maybe it's time to change that desire.
Any last words of wisdom for 2020 you want to share with people, Michael?
There are a couple of things to alert your audience to about next year. I think one of the most important ones is the Venus retrograde. Venus is the planet that rules love, money, intimacy, the emotional body, our experience of giving and receiving love. Every 2 to 3 years or so, Venus will go retrograde. And a retrograde process for any planet is like a visit to the unconscious. Like direct motion would be conscious experience, and then when the planet appears to be moving backwards, you can think of that as a period of time where we're dwelling more in what the unconscious is offering about what that planet's consciousness is. And in this case, it's the giving and receiving of love. So retrogrades are bumpy. They often create difficulty. A Mercury retrograde is most difficult because it's how we navigate our world. And if the navigator is in the unconscious, then he's not looking where he's going, and we bump into a lot of furniture.
Yes.
In a Venus retrograde, it's not quite so befuddling to our movement, like your computer's not going to break down more likely in a Venus retrograde. But matters of love and intimacy and interactions with others and your own relationship to your emotional body will undergo a shift and a change and a process. And the more aware you are of this process before it happens, the more valuable the actual retrograde will be, because you're paying attention. Any retrograde has 3 acts. When the planet is covering the territory that it's going to go back over, that's called the retrograde shadow. That's Venus saying, here I am in this territory, we're going to come back here. So that's the period of time to be really aware of what's going on in your relationships, in your intimacies, and in how you process emotional information. That shadow is April 9th through May 12th. So the first week in April to the first week in May, that's when Venus is moving forward. So the backward journey hasn't started, but that's the period of time to be paying attention, because when Venus turns around, May 12th through June 24th, so that middle of May to the end of June, that's going to be clunky. You can expect old lovers to come back to your attention. That happens a lot in Venus retrogrades. By the way, if that should happen, it's very rarely to get back together. The wrap-up is June 24th to July 27th. So from the end of June to the end of July, there's the what's called, now still the shadow again, the direct shadow. So you've got the retrograde shadow, the retrograde himself, and then the direct shadow, the wrap-up. where now Venus is covering territory that she's been over twice before. In order to do the deep dive well, you just have to be paying attention during the prep. So that's like I'm putting all y'all on notice that when we get to the early April, start paying attention to everything that's happening in this part of your consciousness. So that when the retrograde happens, you can do some deep work. Venus will do this in the sign of Gemini. So it's going to be very much about your thoughts about love and intimacy, your belief systems around what love looks like, what it doesn't look like, because that's what Gemini invented. Just in terms of fun and flirtiness, Venus in Gemini is a blast. And so one thing that might happen as part of this retrograde is that there might be an enormous amount of flirtations and enjoyable interactions at the level of intimacy as well. So a retrograde isn't all bad either. But a process is going to happen. And what we hope to have occur is that as a result of going through that process, all of us become better givers and receivers of love, because when that planet that is the arbiter of us giving and receiving of love is in that process, we are learning something and growing.
How we get to personally navigate this year.
It's to simply pay attention. Mercury is all mind, right? So Mercury plays out in what are we thinking? What are we saying? So I'm going to give you the dates for the Mercury retrogrades, but what's really important is the 3 weeks before.
Tell me more.
So if Mercury's going to go retrograde on February 17th, June 18th, and October 14th, those are the 3 starts of Mercury's 21-day backward journey. What that means is, while everyone's going to write those dates down and be like, I'm going to be ready for Mercury retrograde, I want you to be aware of the 3 weeks before those dates, because that's the prep that will allow the retrograde to be less bumpy and more valuable to you. So if you're in that 3-week period before Mercury retrograde occurs and you have a fight with your boss, or a project you're trying to work on, or a mistake is made. I mean, any number of befuddlements that can happen. If they happen in that 3 weeks before Mercury retrograde, you can bet you've got a lesson, a process, or a continuation of that issue. So it's really the only thing to prepare is to be paying attention. You got to be ready for the sideways ways that you get information, the synchronicities, the billboard, the song on the radio, the happenstance conversation that happens during Mercury retrograde. We're more likely to learn things from that sideways way that Mercury sometimes operates rather than direct.
Where can people go to find out more, Michael, and to find out and what are your daily astro alerts?
MichaelLennox.com is the website. This whole year I've been doing something on Instagram that's been really fun. I'm doing these little videos every day, Red Robe Astrology. So find me on Instagram at Dr. Lennox Dreams, and then I'm on Facebook as Dr. Michael Lennox, and I'm out there quite a lot with free stuff and stuff that I offer, teachings that I offer online for free. The daily astro alerts, they're not free. There's an investment of $10 a month, but I give you every single day a detailed email about the next day's energy.
Oh my God, did I just have the most beautiful interview with Dr. Michael Lennox on Astrology for the New Year. To check out more incredible videos on creating your greatest future, click here. Be sure to subscribe below and click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows. Love you guys.